to the flip video about limiting reactants. So we've been learning stoichiometry, and limiting reactants is just another topic within stoichiometry. So think this is just stoichiometry with a little bit of more questions being asked. Okay, so let's just refresh our memory. A reactant is something that's on the left-hand side of the arrow. So if we look at this equation right here, the stuff over here on the left-hand side of the arrow, these are reactants. We're going to be focusing on reactions and their reactants in limiting reactant. So what does the word limiting mean to you? And what does the word limiting reactant mean? Okay, well, for our problems, a limiting reactant is a reactant that holds you back from making more. It limits you. Okay, so if we take a look at our kind of fun recipe that looks like an equation, and we say, let's pretend that we're going to make a sandwich. And in the sandwich, the recipe says 2 pieces of cheese and 1 hamburger makes a sandwich. That's what the recipe calls for. You have to have 2 pieces of cheese and 1 hamburger. That's it. If you have that, you made a sandwich. Kind of a funky sandwich, but that's our sandwich. All right, now, you go in your fridge and you find 2 pieces of cheese and you find 1 hamburger, right? 1 little patty. And you say, I can make 1 sandwich. Well, what if you have 2 pieces of cheese and no hamburger patties? So 2 pieces of cheese and 0 hamburger patties. Can you make a sandwich? The answer is no, according to the recipe. So what limits you? Which ingredient limits me from making more, making the sandwich? Hopefully you said the hamburger, because you had 0 hamburgers. The hamburger reactant, right, pretend these are our reactants, limits me. All right, let's try another example. Different scenario, but same recipe here. What if I have 4 hamburgers and 2 pieces of cheese? Which ingredient limits me? Well, hopefully you're saying that 2 pieces of cheese needs 1 meat patty hamburger. And what I have here are 2 pieces of cheese and 4 hamburgers. So which one limits me? Well, I could have made more sandwiches if I had more cheese, but I don't. So my cheese is my limiting reactant. Okay, let's take a look at this. Here are my reactants. My cheese, LR for limiting reactants, holds me back. Okay, why? Well, because I had a lot more hamburgers that are all just left over. Okay, this is what we're going to be talking about today, except we're not going to be using hamburger and cheese. We're going to be using some chemicals. So let's take a look at our balanced reaction. I've got my equations already balanced for you. 3, 4, 1, 1, and that's a 4 NaCl. So take a second and write that down. And here's our question. Okay, so instead of talking about 2 pieces of cheese and so many hamburgers, we're going to be talking about 16.3 grams of SCl2 and 10.5 grams of NaF. So I'm telling you how many of these reactants we're starting off with. And now the question is, which of these 2 is going to limit me from making a product, right? What is the reactant that limits me from making my product? All right, with that being said, what we have to do then is 2 stoichiometry problems. So notice my 2 pieces of sheet here for 2 stoichiometry problems. Okay, so I have 16.3 grams of SCl2. That's going to be one of my problems. And I have 10.5 grams, let's move this up, of NaF. Those are my 2 reactants given to me. And I want to know of these two, which one limits me from making a product. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you want to convert my grams into a quantity of my product. So I have to pick any product. It doesn't matter which product you picked. Any product, okay? So I'm going to look and see how much of, let's go with this NaCl, does the SCl2 make? And how much of the NaCl does the NaF make? It doesn't matter which product I pick to go to. So I'm going to convert my grams of SCl2 into moles of NaCl. So I'm going to look up my molar mass in 1 mole of SCl2. Okay, so let's take a look at that. I have that calculated for us. So here is SCl2's molar mass, 1 S, 2 Cl's. Got it from the periodic table. All right. And again, that top and bottom cancel out. Whatever's on the top goes on the bottom. Moles of SCl2. And again, I want to know how many moles of the product does 16.3 grams of SCl2 give me, right? So if this was my cheese, how many sandwiches could I make? So the relationship is for every 3 moles of SCl2, I make 4 moles of NaCl. At this point, it would be good to pull out your calculator and calculate that. So let's go ahead and do that right now. And let's do 16.3 divided by 102.97 times 4 divided by 3. And I have 3 sig figs here, so my answer needs 3 sig figs, and I get 0.211 moles of NaCl. Okay, so that many grams of the reactant makes this much product. Now let me do my next one. How about this reactant? So 1 mole of NaF in the molar mass of NaF, which I've gone ahead and calculated from you from the periodic table. Great. That cancels out with that. And now I'm going to go to the mole ratio and see the relationship of this reactant to that product. Here's NaF. 4 moles of NaF make 4 moles of NaCl. That cancels out with that. I'm going to go ahead and put that in my calculator. So I've got 10.5 divided by 41.99 times 4 divided by 4, which is the same thing as saying 1. And I get 0.250 moles of NaCl. Sig figs are important. 3 sig figs, 3 sig figs. Trailing zeros with a decimal are significant. All right, now the question is, let's bring it back. Which is the reactant that limits me from making more of that NaCl? Let's see. This reactant makes this much product. This reactant makes this much product. Well, this is smaller. So this reactant limits me, right? So let's write that down. When you make less product, 0.211 is smaller than 0.250, so I made less product. Then that's the reactant, then that limits you. Okay, less product made has the limiting reactant then in it. So my limiting reactant is SCl2. Remember, a reactant is what you start with. One of these was going to be the answer. Is it SCl2 or is it NaF? One of those is the answer. Okay, so let's go back and see. This reactant, this amount of this reactant made less product. I could have made more, but this one held me back. Okay, so that's your limiting reactant. And that's what you answered. My limiting reactant is SCl2. Now if they said, how much product do you make? Then you would go on and convert that into grams. So let's go ahead and do that. How much product is made? Well, I can only make 0.211 moles. I can't make the 0.250. Why? Because these two react with each other, and one of them runs out first. The SCl2 runs out first because it makes less. So that rest of that NaF can't react with it. So I start with my 0.211 moles of NaCl, and how much means grams. So now I just have to convert my moles of NaCl to grams of NaCl. 1 mole is equal to the molar mass. And the molar mass of NaCl is about 55 point something, let's say 88. Look it up on your periodic table. Multiply those two. And now you have how much product you made. I took my limiting reactant, figured out how many moles of the product it made, and then got that value and convert it into grams. Okay, this is a video where you probably want to go back and review a little bit, see if you could understand what I was saying, look at the analogy. We're going to practice in class tomorrow.